11th hour of the 11th day, the 11th month of each year, that is Remembrance Day, people get together in each town in front of the cenotaph or war memorial to hold it's not really a religious service per se, but it's, they commemorate the service of our soldiers. And newspapers in the days leading up to and on the day of and then on the days following will write stories about the meaning of Remembrance Day, or about they'll profile various soldiers living and dead, but a lot of them will get into what Remembrance Day really means and what it is we're thinking about or remembering or trying to commemorate on Remembrance Day. Now, routinely, there's one word that comes up, and that's the word sacrifice. And that's understandable. We've had so many people die in wars while fighting. That loss and the reason it was incurred, the fight for freedom, is seen as the sacrifice of a human being for something else. Now, largely this characterization is seen as consistent with the prevailing ethic in North America and around the world, one that says one should sacrifice of oneself for the benefit of others, and that the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate good, the best thing one can do, the ultimate thing one can do, is to literally die so that others may live. And with so many soldiers having died, and with so many people having lived as a result of their efforts to fight the enemy, in whichever way they were fighting, the whole loss of their life is characterized as a sacrifice that was made by them so that others could live. So in column after column, report after report, we will hear praise about sacrifice and how wonderful it is and how it's the ultimate good, the ultimate act of love, and etc. However, there's a psychological sleight of hand going on when that happens. There's a movie, Patton, about the life of General Patton. And in it, there's a speech. Now, I don't know if he ever actually said these words in real life, but he certainly is portrayed by George C. Scott as having said them in the movie. And he says at one point, I think it's at the beginning of the speech, "No poor bastard ever won a war dying for his country. They won a war by making the other poor bastard die for his." Never a truer word was said. When Canadian soldiers signed up for battle, they didn't sign up to die, they signed up to fight. They didn't sign up to be killed by the enemy, they signed up to kill the enemy. No matter how many people were killed, no matter how many Canadian lives were lost, no matter how many soldiers lost their lives, the loss of their life itself did not confer any benefit on anybody except the enemy. What conferred a benefit on all Canadians and on all of the other soldiers who were fighting, and all of the loved ones of the soldiers who died, and of those who fought and didn't die, the value was in their fight, in what they did, and why they were doing it, and the fact that they succeeded in doing it. Specifically, Canadian soldiers and other soldiers from around the world signed up or were drafted in some places to fight the Nazis, to fight the allies of the Nazis as well, the Axis powers, to fight similarly oppressive regimes in other wars. And why were they doing this? Why were they didn't just enjoy fighting. They did it so as to protect the life, the liberty, and the property of themselves, of those they loved, of their friends. And by virtue of their efforts, they ended up protecting the life, liberty, and property of every Canadian, every American, every Brit, everyone who fought the forces who were opposed to life, liberty, and property for every individual. What we should be remembering on days like Remembrance Day and Memorial Day is not that somebody died, but that someone was so unwilling to live in slavery, or to be murdered, or to be expropriated, by the enemy, that they were willing to fight even if it meant that their life was in danger, even if it meant knowing that they could possibly be killed in battle. They fought. They continued to fight. That is a demonstration of their commitment to their own life, to the life of those they love. They so loved life that they fought for it. They fought to keep it. They fought to keep their life, their liberty, their property, and the life, liberty, and property of those they loved and cared for. And the effect of that is that we all had our life, liberty, and property protected. On Remembrance Day, we should be remembering not that somebody died and isn't it great to die for someone, but that isn't it great to fight someone and to be so utterly committed to the cause of freedom that you're willing to put your life in great danger so as to eliminate the threat to freedom. We should be remembering bravery, not death. We should be remembering a commitment to freedom, a love of life that was so strong that they put their own lives in the path of danger. It wasn't a love of death that drove them. It was a love of life. There's no virtue in dying. Dying is not a value. Living is a value. And not one soldier out there with his head screwed on right would have fought a single day if he weren't doing it for life, for the preservation of life. On Remembrance Day, please, let's stop talking about how sacrifice is such a great thing. You know, consider this. If sacrifice were really what was so great about, war and fighting and etc., shouldn't we be celebrating everybody's sacrifice, regardless of why they did it? If the point is that sacrifice is great, sacrificing oneself for others is great, then, that would imply that we should be commemorating the great sacrifices of the Nazis, for God's sakes. The Nazis? You really want to say that weren't the Nazis great because they sacrificed for others? Well, they were masters of self-sacrifice. They were masters of destroying not only themselves, but everyone else. And they did it for the greater good of the Nazi regime. They were the height of altruism. They were the height of self-sacrifice. Hitler, when he talked about what was so great about his German people, said not that they were the smartest, not that they were the strongest, but that they were the most committed to self-sacrifice for the greater good, for the good of the whole. That, he said, was what made them the greatest race on earth. Their capacity to kill themselves, to kill others, to be willing to kill for the greater good, themselves for the greater good. That's what we were fighting in these wars. We were not fighting to preserve a culture in which dying and self-sacrifice is the ultimate good, in which we should always be killing ourselves so that others can live. That's not what we set out to do. We set out to kill those who would force us to sacrifice ourselves. Soldiers didn't go to war to die, they went to war to kill. And rightly so. They were killing the enemy. They were killing the sacrificers. They were killing so that people could continue to live without sacrificing themselves, without sacrificing their liberty, without sacrificing their property. It makes me goddamn angry when I see these people praising self-sacrifice as though that's what was going on. Now, some will say, well, it's because they're Canadian self-sacrificers. That's why we're celebrating only Canadians. That's the reason why we don't celebrate Nazis, because they weren't Canadian. Okay, so let's say that there was a Canadian in the Second World War who decided to go and fight for the Nazis and to sacrifice himself so that other Nazis may live. And that he died while fighting bravely and mowing down Canadians for the greater good of the Nazi regime and the German people. Are you honestly going to tell me that we should be commemorating that bastard? That we should be praising him because he sacrificed of himself for the greater good? For goodness sakes. Do go out on November 11th. Do wear the poppy. Do admire our soldiers. Do remember how they fought and how many of them died because they were so committed to life that they put their lives in the path of danger for themselves and for those they loved. Do remember that. That was a virtuous act. But please do not do them the disservice of suggesting that they went out to die for people. To suggest that they were out there fighting for a moral code in which the greatest good is to kill yourself so that other people can live, is to really say that they were fighting for the cause of the enemy. Because it was the enemy's cause. Self-sacrifice for the greater good of the people. Collectivism. It was the cause of the Allies to fight for the individual, the life of the individual, the value and dignity of every single individual, their life, their liberty, their property. Not as a cell within a big body called a collective or a nation, but as an individual human being with rights of life, liberty, and property that were absolutely inviolable and that had to be defended by bullet, by bomb, by arm-to-arm, hand-to-hand combat. Remember those who fought because they fought, not because they died. Remember them because they killed, because they imprisoned, because they defeated evil. And remember them because they won.